The chamber of the Galactic Council was designed to impress lesser species into submission. Its ceilings stretched high, veined with translucent stone that shimmered with a shifting spectrum, as though the cosmos itself bled through the architecture. Rows of thrones carved from living metal arched upward in tiers, each occupied by an elder, general, or minister of one of the countless star-faring empires. They murmured in deep, buzzing, clicking voices, debating the value of the prisoner about to be brought before them. They had not expected him to walk so calmly. 2 armored Ruktan warriors, each twice his size and armored in jagged obsidian plates, escorted the human into the chamber. They had expected resistance, thrashing, snarling, pleading. Instead, the man walked between them with the easy gait of one strolling into a dinner party, slightly underdressed. His suit was an unassuming charcoal gray, well pressed despite the chains at his wrists. His shoes shone. A tie, striped with navy and white, was knotted at his throat. His dark hair, touched with the faintest gray at the temples, was combed back neatly. And on his face there was that slight, maddening smile. He paused at the center of the chamber and looked around as though admiring an art gallery. "Marvelous ceilings," he said, his voice low, smooth, carrying with ease through the vaulted space. "Reminds me of St. Peter's Basilica, though with a bit more insectal charm." The Zoric's delegate, an insectoid of immense size, chitin glittering blue, clicked its mandibles in irritation. "You will not speak unless spoken to, human." "Oh, forgive me." He inclined his head politely. "Old Earth habit. We fill silence with words. It unsettles us otherwise. Please carry on." The Ruktan warriors shoved him forward, but he adjusted his footing with such balance that it looked choreographed, like a practiced dance. He arrived before the semicircle of thrones, his hands bound but his back straight, his chin level. He looked less like a prisoner and more like a guest invited to explain the circumstances of a minor inconvenience. The chair of the council, a towering Valari philosopher with feathers flecked in gold, tilted its owl-like head. Its voice was a soft coo that echoed nevertheless like a sermon. "You are the son of the Human Federation's chief diplomat, are you not?" He smiled faintly. "That depends. Legally, yes. Personally, I rather hope to make my own name. But mothers do get anxious if their sons miss supper. So yes, your intelligence is correct." The chamber rippled with muted laughter, dry and cruel. The counselors saw arrogance, posturing, bravado. What they did not see, at least not yet, was calculation in his eyes. The chair's golden feathers ruffled. "Do you know why you are here? To provide you a sense of leverage, I suppose." He tilted his head, studying them as though they were chess pieces he had not yet decided how to sacrifice. "You believe Earth is fragile, easily manipulated. And so you take a diplomat, son. A hostage to temper human ambition. A bargaining chip. Correct." The Zorx's mandibles clattered sharply. "We expect your species to obey. You are young, untested, reckless. One display of strength from us, and humanity will kneel." The man's smile widened, not in mockery, but in a kind of patient amusement. "Fascinating. You see this as strength. On Earth, kidnapping family members is usually considered weakness. We expect gangsters to do it, not governing bodies. But culture varies, doesn't it?" The Ruktan guards bristled. One shoved him again, harder this time. He staggered, but caught his balance, chuckling softly. "Steady, gentlemen. This suit wrinkles easily, and I'd hate to give my mother the impression I've been poorly treated." The Valari chair peered closer. "You do not fear us." "Fear." He raised his brows, as though considering the word carefully. "I fear many things, counselor. Late fees at the library. Coffee without sugar. A traffic jam on the Brooklyn Bridge. But you? No, you I find intriguing." A hiss slithered through the chamber, an exhalation of irritation from dozens of alien throats. They had expected trembling, sweat, stammering. Instead, they had a man who seemed vaguely entertained by their theatrics. The chair tried another tactic. "Perhaps you believe your military will rescue you. They will not arrive in time." "Oh, I'm not expecting rescue," he said lightly, as though discussing weather forecasts. He reached into his suit pocket, drawing the instant attention of the guards, who lifted their weapons. Slowly, carefully, he withdrew a small paper packet and held it up between his fingers. Just tea. Would anyone mind if I brewed a cup? Talking always goes better with tea. The chamber went silent. Not from fear, but confusion. Even the philosophers could not parse the meaning of the gesture. Was this humor? Disrespect? Madness? He sighed, shook his head. Never mind. Wrong audience, I suppose. The Zorix leaned forward, mandibles scraping together. Do you humans not understand you are surrounded by powers beyond imagining? We could erase your species in a moment. Of course you could, he said agreeably. But you won't. And do you know why? His eyes glittered faintly, and for the first time, the council felt the chill of something colder than arrogance. Because you're not certain what happens after. And uncertainty is a predator you've never learned how to kill. The Valari narrowed its eyes. You speak boldly for a creature in chains. He looked down at the cuffs, then up again with a polite shrug. Chains? Oh, these? You'll forgive me, but they're rather ceremonial, aren't they? Your blacksmiths make them light. Almost considerate. I suppose you don't often bind creatures who know how to bite back. The words landed heavier than they should have. Something in the room shifted. The laughter quieted. The smugness began to dim. He had not raised his voice, not threatened, not roared. He had spoken gently, like a schoolteacher explaining arithmetic. And that made it worse. The Ruktan guard beside him snarled, lifting its jagged blade. The man turned slightly, studying the reflection of his own calm face in the polished metal. Magnificent craftsmanship, he murmured. Then, with a swift, almost imperceptible movement, he twisted his wrists. The cuffs clicked. The guard staggered back, blade clattering to the floor. And before anyone could blink, the man stooped, picked up the weapon, and offered it back, handle first. You drop this. Gasps scattered like sparks through the chamber. The guard snatched the blade back, trembling with fury. But the man only dusted off his lapels, straightening as though nothing had happened. You see, he continued smoothly, politeness is important, even in war, especially in war. The chair's feathers flared. Enough. You will answer our questions. What military strength does Earth hide? What numbers? What fleets? Numbers. He chuckled. Oh, forgive me. Humans rarely measure strength in numbers. We measure it in resolve, in how long we'll fight after losing, in how deep we'll dig before surrender. You count fleets. We count funerals. Different metrics, different outcomes. The words slid into the chamber like a blade through silk. The aliens shifted uncomfortably. Some whispered among themselves. For the first time, doubt flickered in their eyes. He smiled again, that patient, infuriating smile. And if you doubt me, ask yourselves why I'm so calm right now. Surely I should be terrified, begging for mercy. And yet here I stand, remarking on ceilings, offering tea, returning weapons. Doesn't that trouble you? The Zorix snarled. You bluff. Perhaps. He stepped closer, chains clinking softly. Or perhaps not. You see, counselors, there's a truth about humans you haven't yet learned. We appear polite. We smile. We offer gifts. But that is not softness. That is camouflage. We shake hands while we measure throats. We nod while we plan the funeral procession. We look harmless because it saves time. And because we enjoy the surprise. The silence that followed was thick, weighted, suffocating. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. He leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice so the words coiled into the ears of every delegate like smoke. And you, my gracious hosts, should be asking yourselves a very simple question. The chair, against its better judgment, whispered, What question? He let the pause hang just long enough to tighten every throat. Then he smiled fully for the first time, and in that smile was no warmth. Am I bluffing? The silence cracked like ice underfoot. The delegates shifted, some with irritation, some with fear, all suddenly aware that the human before them was not what he seemed. He straightened his tie, adjusted his cuffs, and let his eyes drift lazily across the chamber. "This isn't my first attainment," he said casually. "Usually, the captors don't live long enough to regret it." And he smiled again, as if he'd told the simplest joke in the world. The chamber did not feel quite as secure as it had before. The alien delegates shifted restlessly on their thrones, each one unwilling to be the first to admit unease. Their prisoner remained where he was, bound yet somehow unbound, smiling as though this entire council were a rehearsal dinner held in his honor. His words hung in the air like smoke, clinging to every wall, every feather, every carapace. The chair ruffled its gilded plumage, as if feathers could restore control. "Your posturing is meaningless," it cooed, voice sharpened into something colder. "You are here because we allow it. Do not mistake your clever tongue for power." Posturing. He tilted his head, as though genuinely curious. "That's interesting. Where I come from, posturing is usually louder. Raised voices, banging fists, maybe the odd duel at dawn. But me? I prefer conversation. It lasts longer, hurts deeper." He let his eyes wander deliberately over each counselor, cataloging them. "Shall we have one?" The Zorix delegate leaned forward, mandibles wet with venom. "We will have interrogation, human. You will provide intelligence on your fleets, your armaments, your defenses. You will explain how humanity spreads like a plague across its tiny worlds." He gave a thoughtful hum, the kind people make when asked whether they prefer cream or sugar in their coffee. Interrogation. Such a heavy word. Why not call it what it is? Curiosity. You're curious about us. That's endearing. Dangerous, but endearing. The Zorix hissed, but before it could respond, he spoke again, voice dipping lower, silken. "Do you know the problem with curiosity? It never stops at answers. It only breeds more questions. And I am very good at asking questions back." The Volari philosophers, those solemn owl-faced watchers, exchanged wary glances. One of them murmured, "He dissembles. He dances with words as though they are weapons." The human's eyes flicked toward the speaker. "Words are weapons, counselor. Anyone who tells you otherwise has never survived a negotiation with my mother." The chamber rippled with nervous laughter. It came too quick, too forced, the sound beings trying to restore their own confidence. He smiled faintly, as though he'd let them cling to it for a moment. Then the chair gestured. A holoscreen unfurled across the chamber, projecting dossiers compiled from fragments of intercepted human transmissions. The delegates watched with smug anticipation as images scrolled. The prisoner's early education, his diplomatic lineage, a tidy record of academic pursuits, service as an aide in minor embassies. Harmless. Forgettable. "Your file speaks plainly," the chair said. "You are not a soldier. You are not a commander. You are a child of politics, a mouthpiece raised in shadows of greater powers. Nothing more." The human regarded the glowing file with mild interest, as though it were a resume he'd forgotten submitting. Then he chuckled softly. "That's the version you were meant to see. Polished. Sanitized. Did you really think Earth would let its enemies have the unedited draft?" The delegates shifted again. The Zorix's mandibles clattered. "Explain yourself." "I'd rather not. Explanations are so finite. But I will say this. If you ever stumble across the redacted lines, you'll notice they aren't random. They cover names, operations, places where people stopped existing." His smile thinned. "I assure you, I was present at every one." The chamber fell silent. The Ruktan guard stiffened, their massive forms no longer so sure of themselves. One flexed its hand on its weapon, uncertain whether the chain-bound human was still safe enough to mock. The human looked at them with something almost like pity. "You're very large, aren't you? On Earth, we call that a disadvantage. Large targets. Difficult to miss." He tilted his head, studying them. "Do you know how many large targets I've reduced to corpses?" "Neither do I. After a while you stop counting." The guards growled low in their throats, but they did not move closer. The chair's feathers trembled with the weight of doubt. "You claim violence, but you hide behind pleasantries. Why speak politely if your truth is brutality?" "Because politeness is efficient," he answered simply. "It disarms. It buys seconds. Seconds kill armies. Besides, I like it. Makes the blood easier to wash away. The words slid through the chamber like poisoned honey. Even those who had dismissed him now felt a sharp edge beneath his velvet voice. He sighed softly, almost wistfully, and then continued with the air of a lecturer guiding inattentive students. Do you want to know how humans really fight? Not with numbers, not with weapons. With imagination. We notice patterns others don't. We find cracks in walls you thought eternal. We see where you are weakest, and then we smile at you while we sharpen the knife. The Valari leaned back, feathers trembling. One whispered, "He sees too much." "Observation," he said, turning toward them, "is a habit you pick up when survival depends on it. Let's take this council as an example, shall we?" His eyes drifted deliberately. "You Zorix. So eager to sneer. But your second clutch has not yet hatched, and you're desperate to prove strength before your rivals replace you. The Valari on the right secretly despises the chair. You think I can't see the way your feathers twitch every time it speaks? And you, great Ruktan warrior, you keep flexing that claw because you broke it in training. Hurts still, doesn't it?" The chamber froze. He should not have known these things. Could not have. Yet every guess struck too close to truth, too precise to dismiss. He smiled softly. "Observation, imagination, resolve. That's how we fight. And you thought I was a hostage." One of the Ruktan roared in fury and lunged. In a blur too fast for their eyes, the human shifted, let the charge carry past him, and with a simple sidestep hooked the giant's ankle. The warrior toppled like a felled tree, armor clanging against the marble floor. Before anyone could react, the human bent, pressed a hand lightly against the creature's throat, and whispered something inaudible. The Ruktan froze, eyes wide. Then, trembling, it crawled back to its feet, blade sheathed, unwilling to continue. The delegates whispered. A single guard cowed by a frail human. It was unthinkable. He adjusted his tie again. "Apologies. Force of habit." The chair's voice cracked as it tried to restore authority. "You play games." "Of course," he said gently. "Games are how humans learn. Chess, poker, baseball. Each one teaches something about timing, about patience, about misdirection. And do you know what we enjoy most? That moment when the opponent still thinks they're winning." His smile deepened. "That's the sweetest second in existence." The delegates stared at him, and for the first time, none felt like the predator in the room. He sighed, looking up at the shimmering ceiling. "You know, you've reminded me of something. A phrase from Earth history. Speak softly and carry a big stick. It's a good phrase, but I've always preferred the other version." He lowered his gaze, his eyes sharp now, glinting with the weight of buried truths. "Smile politely while carrying 1,000 graves behind you." The words slammed into the chamber with the weight of prophecy. No one laughed this time. No one moved. The Zorix hissed finally, though its mandibles trembled. "You claim to be death, yet you sit bound. You are nothing more than a man in chains." He looked at his cuffs, then at them. Slowly, he leaned forward, lowering his voice until every delegate had to strain to hear. "Do you know what the problem is with chains? They only work on creatures that believe they're trapped." The silence was absolute. Even the vents seemed to hush their hum. He straightened, eyes scanning the room one last time, cataloging their fear. Then his lips curved again, the smile no longer gentle, but edged with something darker. "You've been reading my file. But tell me, did you notice the line at the bottom? The one stamped red." The chair's feathers trembled. "There is no such line." "Oh, there is," he murmured. "You simply didn't understand what it meant. It said, classified. Over 1,000 confirmed. Do you know what that number refers to?" The chamber leaned in, unwilling and yet unable to resist. He let the pause stretch, savoring it. Then, softly, almost tenderly, he answered, "Kills." The chamber seemed smaller now, though its vaulted ceiling stretched the height of a cathedral. The air pressed close, heavy with the weight of words that had already been spoken. 1,000 confirmed kills. The phrase still clung to every alien mind, whispering behind their thoughts like an echo they could not silence. The man in the suit stood perfectly still, chains draped at his wrists like jewelry rather than restraints. His smile had not faded, though it no longer resembled warmth. It had sharpened into something leaner, colder, as though the corners of his mouth were the edge of a blade. The chair of the council ruffled its feathers, as though such a simple motion could dislodge unease. "Numbers mean nothing," it declared, though its voice quavered against its will. "We have all killed in war. We have burned worlds. What is one human with 1,000 corpses?" The man tilted his head, as though considering the question carefully. "One man," he murmured, "is nothing. One man willing to keep going after 1,000 kills. Well, that's something else. That's a message." He let the words linger, eyes drifting lazily across the semicircle of thrones. "And I am very good at delivering messages." The Zorik's delegate slammed a clawed limb against its throne, the chitin ringing like a gong. "You dare threaten the council?" "Threaten?" The human arched a brow. "No, no. This is the part you don't quite understand. I'm not threatening you. Threats are for people uncertain of the outcome." He leaned forward slightly, voice dropping into something softer, silkier. "I am simply telling you how the story ends." The words slid into the chamber like cold smoke, and for the first time, the Zoriks did not reply. The man gave a polite cough, as though to clear the air of tension, and then continued conversationally. "Speaking of stories, did you know humans keep entire shelves full of them? Libraries, buildings filled wall to wall with nothing but stories. Some are fairy tales, some histories, some warnings. We've read them all. You might call it practice. We learned long ago how predators think, how prey responds, how empires fall. We've been rehearsing this moment for centuries." The Valari philosophers shifted uneasily, feathers trembling. Their wisdom was supposed to insulate them from fear, but fear did not care for philosophy. One found the courage to speak. "And yet you are here, alone. What is your rehearsal worth if it leaves you in chains?" He smiled again, faint and infuriating. "Alone? You should know better. Humans are never alone. We leave traces, signals, echoes in your machines. Do you hear that humming?" He tilted his head as though listening to a distant choir. "Your systems are screaming at you right now, though you're too proud to admit it." The chamber filled suddenly with a tremor, soft, like the quiver of glass just before it breaks. Lights flickered across the vaulted ceiling, colors bending into jagged streaks. A low alarm pulsed beneath the stone floor, faint but undeniable. The delegates straightened, muttering to one another. The chair spread its wings wide. "What is this disturbance?" The human straightened his tie, perfectly calm. "Punctuality. I admire it." The Zorik hissed, snapping its mandibles. "Explain." "I don't believe I will," he said, voice gentle. "Explanations ruin the fun. But since you insist, consider this. If I've been sitting here in chains, politely chatting with you, what do you imagine my friends have been doing with all that time?" The chamber doors shuddered, a faint reverberation running through the metal, as though a fist had tested its weight. Every guard snapped to alertness, weapons raised. The human chuckled softly. "Ah, right on time." The Ruktan warriors flanking him growled, but the sound faltered as the doors quivered again, harder now. Somewhere in the distance, muffled through layers of stone and steel, came the unmistakable crack of weapons fire. The chair's golden feathers bristled in panic. "This is impossible. Our station is impregnable." "Everything's impregnable," the human replied, "until someone pregnant with enough anger decides otherwise." He smirked faintly. "A little earth humor. Forgive me." The delegates erupted into argument, voices clashing, accusations thrown across the chamber. Some demanded immediate execution. Others insisted on negotiation. Still others, the wisest among them, simply sat frozen, realizing too late what they had brought upon themselves. The human remained silent, content to watch them fracture. Only when their chaos reached its peak did he speak again, softly, firmly, cutting through their noise like a blade through silk. "This is the part where you learn what humanity really is." The doors exploded inward. Not shattered, not breached, exploded, outward fragments whistling across the chamber like shrapnel. Alien guards screamed as shards of steel tore into their flesh. Smoke poured in, curling like dark fingers through the grand hall. And then they came. Human operatives, clad in matte black armor that seemed to drink the light, poured into the chamber in disciplined silence. No shouted orders, no wasted movements, only precision, only inevitability. Weapons rose and fell, flashes of fire snapping across the smoke. Alien guards toppled before they even understood what had entered. The delegates recoiled, eyes wide, feathers and mandibles trembling. For all their boasts of power, they had never seen war brought into their sanctum so swiftly, so mercilessly. The man in the suit did not flinch. He watched calmly as his captors died, then turned to the council with that same patient smile. "Shall we resume our conversation?" The operatives moved like shadows, cutting through resistance with terrifying ease. They did not roar or bellow. They did not even speak. They killed in silence, and the silence was worse than screams. One operative strode forward, stopping at the human side. Without a word, it produced a small key and released the chains. The cuffs clattered to the floor like coins on marble. The man flexed his wrists, rubbing the faint marks. Much better. He looked at the nearest delegate, a trembling Volari whose feathers quaked with barely contained terror. "You see, counselor, chains are for creatures who believe in them. I never did." The Volari whispered hoarsely, "You are death." He chuckled softly, shaking his head. "Death is a job description. I'm just efficient." The operatives fanned out, securing exits, weapons trained on every guard who still clung to life. The chamber that had once felt eternal now seemed fragile, like a glass dome under a hammer. The chair tried to gather its authority once more, though its feathers trembled visibly. "What do you want?" The human turned slowly toward it, expression unreadable. "Want? You make it sound like a negotiation. This isn't negotiation. This is correction." The chair's voice wavered. "Correction." "You kidnapped me," he said, tone light as though stating the weather. "You thought to use me against my people. But humans don't work like that. We don't bend when you touch our family. We break things. Important things. Empires, usually." The words landed like stone, heavy and final. The chair tried to protest, but the human raised a hand, silencing it. "Do you know the real irony? My mother warned you. She stood here, in this very chamber, and told you politely never to involve her children. And yet here I am." His smile hardened. "Do you see now why you should have listened?" The counselors shifted, some in anger, most in fear. None dared to speak. He began to pace slowly, hands clasped behind his back, the operative's eyes tracking him like loyal hounds. "You all see humans as anomalies. Soft-skinned, short-lived, sentimental. Easy prey. But prey doesn't walk into the lion's den smiling. Prey doesn't hijack the lion's throat with words. Prey doesn't plant knives in shadows and wait patiently for the lights to go out. Do you understand yet?" He stopped, eyes sweeping across them. "We were never prey. We were pretending." The silence after was suffocating. Even the smoke seemed to hold still, reluctant to move. Finally, he returned to the center, where his chains still lay coiled on the floor. He nudged them lightly with his shoe. "These were meant to bind me, but they'll serve better as a reminder. Every time you see them, remember this moment, when you realize too late that the human you captured wasn't a diplomat's son in need of rescue." He leaned forward, eyes gleaming with that dangerous calm. "I was the rescue." The words struck harder than any weapon. Several delegates flinched visibly. One of the Volari whispered a prayer. The man straightened, smoothing his suit jacket, and adjusted his cuffs as though preparing for a dinner engagement. His operatives closed ranks around him, forming a circle of silent menace. Then he smiled once more, almost warmly. "Now, counselors, we finally arrive at the interesting part. You've seen the mask slip. You've seen the predator. The only question left," he paused, letting the silence thicken until it ached, "is how many of you survive the unveiling." The smoke curled through the council chamber like a living thing, clinging to every ornate pillar, winding around every trembling delegate. The once pristine air was soured by the acrid tang of discharged weapons, the sharp iron bite of spilled blood. Shards of the sundered doors still glittered across the marble floor, each one catching the light of the flickering ceiling crystals like fragments of broken stars. The man in the gray suit stood at the center, unchained now, his operatives forming a silent perimeter around him. The council, the so-called masters of galactic order, cowered in their thrones. The chair's golden feathers drooped, dulled by fear. The Zoric's delegates' mandibles twitched, not in arrogance now, but in restraint, as though clenching them too hard might betray the trembling within. The Rukten guards, those towering warriors once so certain of their dominance, stood rooted, unwilling to advance, unwilling to retreat. The man smoothed his tie. The gesture was slow, deliberate, obscene in its casualness. "This chamber was designed to make visitors feel small," he said softly, voice carrying without effort. "And yet look at you. So tall, so proud, and now so very, very small." The chair struggled to recover dignity. "You come into our sanctum with soldiers and violence. You spit on diplomacy. Do you know what this means?" He tilted his head slightly. "Yes. It means you kidnapped the wrong man." One of the operatives moved forward and placed a sleek pistol in his open palm. He weighed it lightly, testing the balance, then set it down gently on the rail before him as though it were a piece of delicate porcelain. He didn't need the weapon. That was the point. "You think violence is the core of humanity," he continued, his eyes sweeping over them. "It isn't. Violence is the symptom. The core is something else, something you never noticed because you never bothered to look." He leaned forward, voice dropping lower. "We adapt. We endure. And when pushed, we calculate with a clarity that makes the void itself envious." The Zoric hissed, mandibles snapping. "You will not leave here alive." "Alive." He chuckled softly, shaking his head. "You still don't understand. I was never here to survive. I was here to finish something." The delegates shifted, exchanging panicked whispers, but he cut through them again with a single glance. "Every move I've made since you dragged me into this chamber, every smile, every word, every second I let pass, was measured. You thought you were interrogating me. In truth, I was dismantling you." The Volari philosopher clutched the arms of its throne. "Dismantling. Your guard rotations. Your power cycles. The cracks in your alliances. I've been watching, listening, calculating. And while I stood here, politely entertaining you, my people have been rearranging the board." The floor beneath them trembled, a deep rumble like the growl of a slumbering beast. The lights flickered again. Alarms wailed through the station now, shrill and insistent, not the soft pulse from before, but the scream of systems collapsing. He smiled faintly, tilting his head as though listening to a symphony only he could hear. "That sound? That's inevitability. Your defenses are gone. Your fleets outside are blind, cut off from their command. Your networks are ashes in the wind. And all of it happened while you were too busy staring at the suit." The chair's feathers flared in panic. "Impossible. Everything is impossible," he said gently, "right up until it isn't." The operatives shifted slightly, their silence more eloquent than any battle cry. They stood like shadows incarnate, weapon steady, eyes invisible behind black visors. The counselors looked from them to the man in the suit, and for the first time they began to understand the title whispered like a curse across hidden battlefields. Death in a suit. The Zorix roared, leaping to its feet, towering over the human with claws extended. The man did not move. He simply adjusted his cufflink, eyes never leaving the delegate. The operatives raised their weapons, but he lifted a hand to still them. The Zorix charged. It was over in a second. The human sidestepped with the grace of a dancer, seized one of the alien's limbs, and redirected the massive weight. The Zorix crashed to the ground, its mandibles cracking against the marble floor. In a single motion, he pressed the pistol, still resting on the rail, against the creature's head. But he didn't pull the trigger. He didn't need to. He leaned close instead, his voice a whisper of silk and steel. "Do you feel it now? That certainty? That knowledge that you've already lost?" The Zorix froze, mandibles quivering, then slowly lowered its claws. He straightened, leaving the pistol untouched. Weapons are crude. Fear is cleaner. Fear lasts. The council sat paralyzed. Their power, their arrogance, their illusions, all lay shattered at the feet of a man who had done nothing more than speak softly and smile. He turned back to them, folding his hands behind his back. This is how it ends. Not with fire. Not with war fleets. With a lesson. Humanity doesn't need numbers. We don't need lifespans measured in millennia or fleets that blot out suns. We need only one thing. He paused, letting the silence ache. Resolve. And you have now witnessed what resolve looks like in a suit. The chair's voice trembled. What will you do with us? He considered the question, his gaze thoughtful, almost kind. That depends on what you do next. You could resist. But resistance will not save you. You could run. But where would you go that we haven't already mapped? Or you could listen. The chair swallowed hard. Listen to what? To reason, he said softly. I am not here to slaughter you. If I wished, you'd already be gone. I'm here to remind you of something you seem to have forgotten. Never take a human family hostage. Not unless you want to meet the side of us that builds cemeteries faster than empires. The silence was unbearable. No one spoke. Even the alarms seemed quieter, as though the station itself was listening. He bent, picked up the discarded chains, and let them dangle from his hand. The links rattled like bones. These will do as a symbol. Keep them. Hang them above your doors. Carve them into your walls. Let every delegate who enters this chamber remember that you once bound a human and thought him powerless. The operatives closed in slightly, their presence pressing like a storm. The man looked over them all, eyes calm, voice steady. You wanted leverage. Now you have it. You will return me to Earth. You will release my people. You will step back from the games you've been playing with us. Or these chains will be the last reminder of your council's existence. The delegates trembled, but none dared object. The weight of inevitability was too heavy. He dropped the chains with a clatter, the sound echoing like a gavel strike. The judgment was made. The sentence was clear. The chair sagged in its throne, feathers dull, voice hoarse. We understand. Good. He straightened, brushing dust from his sleeve. Then this conversation has been productive after all. He turned to leave, his operatives falling into formation around him. But at the threshold of the shattered doors, he paused and glanced back. His smile returned, smaller now, softer, though no less dangerous. One last thought, he said, his voice carrying like a whisper across the chamber. Next time, serve the tea properly steeped. It saves lives. And with that, he walked into the smoke, leaving the council in silence, each one haunted by the sight of death wrapped neatly in civility.